Over the past 7 years, the Toronto Raptors have been one of the more successful franchises in the league. Since the 2013-14 season, the Raptors have posted a 66% win percentage in the regular season. They've been a 4 seed or higher each year, and they are one of just 5 franchises to win a championship in this span. With all that in mind, it's safe to say that Toronto has been provided with some good basketball in recent memory. However, the 2020-21 season has gotten off to an unexpectedly bad and frankly unprecedented start. The biggest reason for this team's past success is that they've consistently met the criteria for being a good team. Barring injuries, there are 3 boxes that a team must check off if they want to get wins in the NBA. First of all, you have to have 1 to 2 all-star caliber players on your team. With the development of Fred VanVleet, it's fair to say that the Raptors now have 3 all-star caliber players with him, Kyle Lowry, and Pascal Siakam. Next, there must be great team chemistry. In order to develop that great team chemistry, you need 2 things. Number 1, good locker room guys, and 2, continuity. This franchise has great leaders at the guard spots in Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet, and many of the guys on this roster have been here for multiple seasons, meaning that they know their roles and how to coexist. Finally, good coaching is a necessity, and Nick Nurse is one of the better coaches in the league. Over the years, the Raptors have had some great teams because they checked off all of these boxes, and as I suggested, it seems like they checked them all off this year as well. Yet here we are 10 games into the season and Toronto is 2-8. The last time that the Raptors started 2-8 was in the 2010-11 season after losing Chris Bosh to the Miami Heat. By the end of the year, their final record was 22-60, the 3rd worst in the entire league. But if you take a look at that 2010-11 Toronto Raptors roster, you can see that they weren't nearly as talented as the 2-8 Raptors team we've been watching in 2021. That's what makes this year's team so confusing. On paper, the Raptors should be one of the better teams in the East like they've been the past 7 seasons. However, they're on pace for a top 3 pick in the 2021 draft. In addition, one could argue that the Raptors' 2-8 record is deceiving since they have had big leads in a lot of their games this year and lost most of their games in close fashion to some good opponents. Regardless, the Toronto Raptors are at a crossroads that they haven't been at in a very long time, and management will have to take the next few weeks to really evaluate what to do with this roster, as the wrong decision could set this franchise back for the foreseeable future. In my opinion, there are 2 potential paths that management could take this team down. The first path involves believing in this core and trying to fix their weaknesses in the hopes of making a run into the playoffs. This year, the East is very wide open. People still have questions about Milwaukee's ability to win in the playoffs, there are concerns about the Nets' defense and chemistry issues, and the Miami Heat haven't looked like a team fresh off of a finals appearance. The point being that there is not a heavy favorite in the conference, meaning that the East is up for grabs. But in order for the Raptors to improve so they can actually get to the playoffs, there are 2 changes that they must make. First of all, it's time for them to start Chris Boucher and essentially have Len and Baines outside of the rotation. On defense, Boucher is agile, he can protect the rim, and he brings a contagious energy when he's on the floor. Offensively, Boucher can score in a number of ways, but most notably, he's shot the ball way better from the outside than any other center on this team, and he'd give the Raptors a lot more spacing in the starting lineup. The only downside to starting Boucher is that he is pretty slim, so sometimes he resorts to fouling in order to compensate for his weight mismatch. However, Boucher is a versatile defender that can guard multiple positions. Similar to the way that Golden State used to throw multiple defenders at LeBron throughout a game, the Raptors could throw multiple bodies at opposing centers. Rather than having Boucher defend the opposing center all game, Toronto could alternate that responsibility between Boucher, Siakam, and Anunoby throughout the game. There are multi-talented defenders on this team, and the Raptors will have to make use of that in order to win more games. Another issue that needs to be resolved is their second half woes, and I think there's a quick fix for that. At the start of last season, Nick Nurse was trying to figure out the bench rotation since Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard left, and guys like Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby were entering the starting lineup. Early on, Nick Nurse was pretty hard on some of the newly signed players like Stanley Johnson and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, calling them out publicly and refusing to give them minutes off the bench. This year has been no different. Nurse has called out Terrence Davis and Matt Thomas for their poor defense, and he's alluded to the fact that Malachi Flynn still has some work to do before he can consistently crack the rotation. Nurse is a good coach in the sense that he doesn't show favoritism. For example, despite the fact that Terrence Davis made the All-Rookie second team last year, Nurse has been giving more minutes to Stanley Johnson, a player that has been labeled as a bust by many people simply because Stanley is giving more effort on the defensive end. It's a good tone setter, and this tactic helps to create a winning culture, but the Raptors aren't winning at the moment, and a larger rotation could help. Over the course of the first 10 games, the Raptors have gotten off to great starts, but they've been consistently underperforming in the second half. Nick Nurse played his starters a lot of minutes last year, but the heavy minutes may be taking a larger toll on the starters this year since there wasn't much of a break between the bubble and the start of training camp. As I said, Nurse has had complaints about Terrence Davis, Matt Thomas, and Malachi Flynn, but if he inserts Boucher into the starting lineup like I think he should, the Raptors are going to be in need of some more scoring off the bench, and those three guys could provide that scoring punch. So in sum, path number one involves the Raptors holding on to the guys they have, not making any trades, and making a few changes to the rotation. The hope here is that the team will figure it out, go on a win streak, and get themselves into the playoffs where they can compete in an up-for-grabs conference. On the other hand, skeptics might say that this team is just not good enough to make that run into a playoff spot, and even if they do make it, their ceiling is probably a second-round exit at best. That being said, these people would propose that the Raptors prioritize the long-term future of this team by making a few moves. Now, people on this side of the argument aren't necessarily extremists. Yes, I'm sure you could find a few Raptors fans that would be clamoring for the team to trade everyone away so that they can embrace a full rebuild, but realistically, there's only one key player that Toronto should consider trading, and that's Kyle Lowry. Lowry has become a fan favorite in Toronto, and he's enjoyed the best stretch of his career with this franchise. Even though he'll be turning 35 this March, Lowry is still an all-star caliber player, which is why there are Raptors fans that want to hold on to him. However, many people feel that this team, as currently constructed, cannot win a championship. Therefore, they would be better off moving on from Lowry and bringing in some young talent, picks, or expiring contracts. In one of my previous videos, I discussed the possibility of a Lowry trade to the Clippers. In order to get this done, the Knicks would have to get involved and make it a 3-team trade, but we're not going to discuss the Knicks side of things because it really doesn't matter that much. In this trade, the Raptors would be sending Kyle Lowry and Alex Len to the Clippers, and they'd be receiving Patrick Beverley, Ivica Zubac, and Luke Kennard, and possibly a future second-round pick. I'm not too sure how willing the Clippers would be to include a pick since they basically have none, but even without the pick, this would still be a good deal for Toronto. By doing a trade like this, the Raptors would be getting younger, and on top of that, any sort of Lowry trade would likely make the team worse, which means they'd end up with better odds in the draft lottery. That being said, I could only see Lowry being traded if the Raptors don't seem to figure things out this season and are on the outside looking in as the trade deadline approaches. The other option would be to trade Lowry in exchange for expiring contracts so that they can ensure that they get a lottery pick and so they can sign a younger all-star level player such as Victor Oladipo, or use the additional cap space to sign multiple good role players. Now look, the Raptors don't have to trade Lowry. They could always try to re-sign him, but what a lot of people are saying is that as Lowry ages, his trade value will only decrease. Considering the Raptors haven't gotten off to a good start, the argument would be that now is a better time than ever to move on from him. It's easy to see the rationale on both ends. Last season, the Raptors were a Game 7 win away from getting to the Eastern Conference Finals and potentially the NBA Finals. However, success doesn't last forever, and it's important that management is able to recognize when their team's run is over and prepare for the future accordingly. If the Raptors don't make any trades, I think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't see them contending for a championship. My stance on team building is that you have to have a direction, and if the Raptors fully commit to being a 6th or 7th seed this year, I don't see that as a direction because most of the guys on this team are in their prime and won't get much better than they already are. Now, you could say that the Raptors are doing bad this year because they are away from home, but I don't know if management is going to want to base their future on that assumption. All that being said, I think it's time for the Raptors to move on from Kyle Lowry. Let me know down in the comments what you think the Raptors should do. I know there are a lot of different ways that they can go about handling the situation, and I'd like to hear some different perspectives. With all that being said, I'm out.